Most evil fathers in U.S. history, full list and shocking crimes. Welcome back to Justice Reversed, where real crimes meet real justice. Today, we're revealing the most disturbing fathers in U.S. criminal history, those who didn't just fail their families, but destroyed them. Number 1. Chad Doerman. They trusted him with bedtime stories. Instead, he gave them bullets. Chad Doerman turned fatherhood into murder and a family home into a crime scene. On June 15, 2023, in Monroe Township, Ohio, Chad Doerman, 32, carried out one of the most cold-blooded families in recent American history. The horror wasn't born from sudden rage, it was methodically premeditated. Doerman had been silently plotting the murder of his 3 sons since October 2022. That June afternoon, he called them in for a nap. While they rested, he retrieved a .22 caliber semi-automatic rifle from his gun safe. He shot 4-year-old Hunter first as the child lay unaware. Then, he pursued 7-year-old Clayton into a field, shooting him in the back and again in the head. His youngest, Chase, just 3, clung to life behind his mother, Laura, who desperately tried to shield him. Doerman reloaded and fired 1 fatal shot into Chase's head. He fired a total of 9 rounds, 4 into Hunter, 4 into Clayton, 1 into Chase. His 14-year-old stepdaughter escaped, running barefoot along the road, shouting, "My stepdad is killing my family." Her screams alerted neighbors and led to a 911 call. When deputies arrived at 4:25 p.m., Doerman was sitting calmly on the porch, watching Laura perform CPR on her lifeless sons. He didn't resist arrest. He later admitted to planning the murders for months and compared himself to Adolf Hitler. His stated reason: he was tired of life. The court later heard how Laura had been shot in the hand while trying to protect her children. She survived, but was left to witness each of her sons executed one by one and then to live with the silence of their absence. In July 2024, Chad Doerman pleaded guilty and received 3 consecutive life sentences without parole. He will die alone, under permanent suicide watch in an Ohio Supermax prison. His face during sentencing revealed nothing. No emotion, no remorse, only a chilling void where a father's love should have been. It's not the weapon or the motive that stays with us, it's the image of 3 little boys, trusting, unaware, dying by the hand they reached for every night before bed. That image forces us to ask, what signs were there, and how many chances were missed to stop him? Sudden emotional withdrawal or detachment in a parent is a red flag, not a phase, especially when paired with talk of hopelessness. Unexplained fixation on weapons or extreme historical figures should never be dismissed. If a child expresses fear or you sense rising household tension, take it seriously. Crisis plans and early intervention can mean the difference between survival and tragedy. Evil doesn't always come from the shadows. Sometimes, it tucks behind your children at night and pulls the trigger. Stay alert. The next warning sign might be right beside you. Number 2. Aaron Schaffhausen. He asked for one afternoon alone with his daughters. What followed was a crime that shattered a family and echoed across the nation. On July 10, 2012, in River Falls, Wisconsin, 34-year-old Aaron Schaffhausen arrived at his ex-wife Jessica's home for what was meant to be a short visit with his 3 daughters, Amara, 11, Sophie, 8, and Cecilia, 5. Jessica, trusting the man she once married, left them alone. Hours later, all 3 children were dead. Aaron used a knife to slit their throats. He strangled the youngest, Cecilia. The girls were later discovered lying in their beds, tucked in under blankets as if asleep, each with a white t-shirt tied around her neck. A gas can had been spilled across the home, suggesting he considered burning the evidence but abandoned the plan. He then called Jessica and said, "You can come home now. I killed the kids." She immediately contacted the police. By the time officers arrived, Aaron had fled. He later turned himself in at a nearby police station without resistance. The motive? Spite. Jessica had moved on with her life and found a new relationship. Aaron couldn't accept it. Prosecutors revealed that months before the murders, he had threatened Jessica's boyfriend and even fantasized aloud about forcing Jessica to choose which child would die. His calls to her sometimes exceeded 30 per day. In court, Aaron pleaded guilty but insane, blaming a rare mental disorder. His defense claimed he couldn't tell right from wrong. But the jury disagreed. After just 3.5 hours, they ruled that Aaron was sane and guilty. Judge Howard Cameron sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms without parole, stating, "Each child must be recognized as an individual." Aaron remained expressionless. Jessica said nothing, but her sister called Aaron an evil coward and wished he would rot in hell. Today, Aaron Schaffhausen is imprisoned at Waupun Correctional Institution in Wisconsin. He will never walk free again. The family home was demolished. In its place now stands the Triangles Playground, built in memory of Omara, Sophie, and Cecilia, a space of joy rising from unimaginable grief. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was cold, calculated revenge by a man who chose to destroy innocence to punish a woman for moving forward. When fatherhood becomes a weapon, the wounds never stop bleeding. And yet in every tragedy, there's something to be learned. Threats made by ex-partners, even in frustration, should never be dismissed when children are involved. Obsessive contact, jealousy, or attempts to manipulate parenting time are red flags of potential danger. Always insist on supervised visits when past behavior shows instability or emotional volatility. Protecting children must come before honoring past relationships. Evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears a father's smile. And when love turns into vengeance, the ones who suffer most are the innocent souls caught in the crossfire of someone else's broken pride. Number 3. Chris Watts. He claimed to be a family man. He smiled in the photos. He told his coworkers he had it all. But in truth, Chris Watts was planning to erase it all, permanently. On the morning of August 13, 2018, in Frederick, Colorado, 33-year-old Christopher Lee Watts murdered his entire family. The victims, his pregnant wife, Shanann, and their 2 young daughters, Bella, 4, and Celeste, 3. Chris strangled Shanann with his bare hands in their home. She was 15 weeks pregnant with their 3rd child, a son they planned to name Nico. Then, shockingly, he turned to his daughters. He smothered Celeste first. Then he tried to kill Bella, but she fought back. Forensics later revealed defensive wounds and that Bella bit her tongue in a desperate struggle to stay alive. Chris stuffed their bodies into his work truck and drove to a remote oil site. There, he buried Shanann in a shallow grave. He then shoved Bella and Celeste through the narrow 8-inch hatches of 2 crude oil tanks. A tuft of blonde hair was later found on the rim of one tank. Bella had scrapes along her body, the grim sign of the force used to hide her. Hours later, Chris appeared on television, pretending to search for his missing family. In reality, he was covering up the murders. Investigators later discovered he was having an affair with a coworker, Nicole Kessinger, and researching tropical vacations for 2. He had even searched for drugs to terminate Shanann's pregnancy without her knowledge. Divorce, he told police, wasn't an option, murder was. After failing a polygraph, Chris confessed. First, he blamed Shanann for the girls' deaths. Then, under mounting evidence, he admitted the full truth. Messages from his mistress directly contradicted his lies. On November 6, 2018, Chris pleaded guilty to 5 counts of first-degree murder and 4 additional felonies. He avoided the death penalty through a plea deal supported by Shanann's family. Judge Marcelo Kopkow called it the most inhumane and vicious crime he had ever seen. Chris was sentenced to 5 life terms plus 84 years. He now lives in Dodge Correctional Institution, Wisconsin. The Watts family home was later sold, but no one forgets what happened inside its walls. Some monsters don't sneak in through windows. They walk through the front door with keys in hand. But from darkness, there must be light, lessons etched in tragedy. If we look closely, this case warns us clearly. Emotional withdrawal and secrecy from a partner, especially during major life changes, should never be brushed off. When someone avoids conflict resolution and seeks extreme control, danger can follow. Any signs of planning escape or harm must be taken seriously. Prevention often hides in details we're too afraid to confront. Sometimes, evil isn't a stranger lurking outside. It's the man in family portraits smiling, hiding, and waiting for the right moment to ruin everything. Number 4. Travis James Mullis. He walked away from stability. He drove toward destruction. In less than an hour, a father's final decision would haunt a community forever. On the morning of January 29, 2008, in Galveston, Texas, 21-year-old Travis James Mullis committed one of the most brutal cases of infant familicide in recent U.S. history. His victim was his 3-month-old son, Elijah Mullis, born October 29, 2007. Mullis later confessed that he had sexually assaulted Elijah, strangled him with his hands, and finally stomped on the baby's skull until it was crushed. He wouldn't stop crying and I hit my breaking point, Mullis told investigators. Wildlife enthusiast Jesse Zarro found the baby's body on Seawall Boulevard, initially mistaking it for a discarded doll. Elijah's empty car seat lay 30 feet away. After the murder, Mullis fled Texas and disappeared. A national manhunt lasted 3 days. He surrendered voluntarily to police in Philadelphia on February 1, 2008, where he confessed and was extradited to face charges of capital murder and aggravated sexual assault of a child. His past was marked by severe trauma. Orphaned early, adopted by relatives, and sexually abused from the age of 3, Mullis struggled with bipolar disorder his entire life. Diagnosed as severely mentally ill, he reported hearing voices and experiencing flashbacks. Yet the court determined he was competent to stand trial. During proceedings, the prosecution laid out overwhelming evidence. The jury convicted him of capital murder, with aggravating factors of sexual assault and the victim's age. Jurors unanimously sentenced him to death, agreeing with prosecutors who called it a killing carried out in the most depraved manner imaginable. Appeals followed. Mullis at first waived his rights, then reversed and requested a review based on mental health. In June 2023, the court reaffirmed his competency. He accepted his sentence and chose not to seek further appeals. On September 24, 2024, Travis Mullis was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit. The process was delayed by difficulties finding a usable vein. In his final statement, he said, "I don't regret this decision to legally expedite this process. I do regret the decision to take the life of my son. It was my decision that put me here." A small memorial still marks the site where baby Elijah was found. Locals gather annually to leave flowers. His grandmother remembered him as extraordinarily beautiful. For many in Texas, the case remains a painful reminder of failure, both personal and systemic. But stories this dark carry warnings worth remembering. Unaddressed childhood trauma and untreated mental illness in caregivers can become deadly if ignored. Early signs of instability, emotional outbursts, isolation, erratic parenting must trigger intervention, not excuses. Infants are defenseless. Any risk factors in their environment demand immediate action. It's not overreaction, it's protection. In the end, Elijah Mullis didn't die because no one cared. He died because no one acted soon enough. This wasn't just a failure of one father. It was a collapse of every safeguard that should have protected a vulnerable child. Let his story be a siren, not just for grief, but for action. Because when the warning signs are ignored, the consequences echo forever. Number 5, Ronnie O'Neal III. A child's night should end in sleep and safety. But on one brutal evening, a Florida home became the final chapter in a family's destruction. On March 18, 2018, in Tampa, Florida, 33-year-old Ronnie O'Neal III committed a spree of violence that stunned the nation. He murdered his longtime partner Kenyatta Barron and their 9-year-old daughter Ronivia, and attempted to kill their 8-year-old son, Ronnie IV. The first 911 call captured a terrified woman's voice screaming for help. Moments later, another call came from O'Neal himself. "I just killed her." When officers arrived, they found Kenyatta barely alive in the yard, her face bludgeoned with a shotgun barrel. She died before help could reach her. Inside, they discovered Ronivia's lifeless body. A special needs child with limited speech, she had been struck multiple times with a hatchet. Her vulnerability made the brutality even more horrifying. She couldn't scream, couldn't escape. O'Neal then set the house on fire with his young son still inside. The boy was stabbed and burned but miraculously survived. In a moment that gripped the courtroom months later, Ronnie IV bravely testified, "My father shot my mother." His words helped seal the prosecution's case. Ronnie O'Neal represented himself during trial, delivering rants laced with paranoia. He shouted about white demons, claimed divine purpose, and said he was defending his family. A forensic psychologist testified that O'Neal suffered from delusional disorder, possibly compounded by PTSD. Judge Michelle Sisko described the case as the worst I've ever seen. A jury convicted him of 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted murder, aggravated child abuse, and arson. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms without parole, plus 90 years. Though the death penalty was on the table, a single juror's objection prevented it. Kenyatta's grieving mother, Carrie Lloyd, wept as she addressed the court, wishing her daughter and granddaughter had received justice through a death sentence. The surviving son, now under protective care, continues to recover from physical and emotional trauma. There were no official legislative reforms following the case, but it did stir community dialogue on identifying mental health red flags and better intervention in domestic abuse situations. Sometimes, the scariest place for a child isn't the streets, it's their own home. But even in the darkest homes, signs often flicker before the flames. This tragedy reminds us why early detection matters. Repeated talk of conspiracies, demons, or divine missions can signal dangerous delusions. Take them seriously. If a parent shows sudden paranoia, hostility, or violent tendencies, early mental health intervention is urgent. Children with special needs are especially vulnerable. Silence or fear should never be dismissed. Their safety depends on adult vigilance. The law brought justice, but only vigilance can prevent such horrors from beginning at all. Number 6. Anthony Tony Todt. He promised to bring his family closer. Instead, he turned their home into a tomb and shattered a community's sense of where safety ends and horror begins. On January 13, 2020, in Celebration, Florida, detectives discovered a scene that would be etched into the worst nightmares of Osceola County. Inside Anthony Tony Todt's home lay his wife, Megan, and their 3 children, Alexander, 13, Tyler, 11, and Zoe, 4, alongside the family dog, Breezy. All were dead. Todt, once known as a cheerful physical therapist and Disney dad, now faced 4 first-degree murder charges. Investigators learned the murders occurred weeks earlier, in December 2019. Todt told police he suffocated Zoe with a pillow to save her soul, then stabbed and smothered his sons. He claimed Megan stabbed herself but said he finished the act when she didn't die. All victims had lethal doses of Benadryl and stab wounds. Their bodies were wrapped in blankets, clinging to crucifixes. Zoe's body, decomposed, was found beneath Megan's. Todt had been under investigation for healthcare fraud, facing financial collapse. He claimed the killings were part of a family pact, that Megan had researched end times rituals. But his stories shifted constantly. Prosecutors pointed to clear premeditation and control. Todt had isolated the family, withdrawn cash, and ignored eviction notices before carrying out the murders. When the FBI and Osceola deputies entered on January 13th, they found Todt disoriented and drifting through the decay. He had taken pills, offered resistance, but was treated and arrested. In court, Todt pled not guilty, asserting Megan was responsible and that his confession was coerced. But evidence, including his own admission and forensic analysis, contradicted him. Judge Keith Karsten called Todt a destroyer of worlds. A jury unanimously found him guilty after 6 hours of deliberation. He was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences without parole, plus 1 year for animal cruelty. Todt stood motionless as the verdict was read. In court, Megan's aunt said through sobs, "He crushed his whole family. Now, all I have are pictures and memories." Local children asked their parents, "Are you going to kill me too?" A neighborhood once filled with innocence was now left with fear and silence. Not all betrayals begin with violence. Some start in whispers, in slow isolation, in unseen desperation. And while no law changed after this crime, what should change is our readiness to act before signs grow fatal. Apocalyptic or soul-saving beliefs involving children must trigger serious concern. These are not spiritual quirks, they're red flags. Isolation during a financial or legal crisis can escalate into lethal desperation. Watch for sudden withdrawal or control. Unexplained drugging or sedation of children is never benign. Question it immediately and involve professionals. Anthony Todt didn't just murder his family, he violated the very idea of trust, of protection, of what home is supposed to mean. He wore the mask of a loving father until it slipped, revealing the abyss beneath. In remembering Megan, Alexander, Tyler, and Zoe, we're not just mourning a family lost, we're warning every family watching. Because silence hides danger, and prevention starts long before the final breath. Number 7. Adam Montgomery. She had just learned to tie her shoes. Her laughter still echoed in family videos. But Harmony Montgomery's short life ended not in childhood wonder but in silence, hidden in horror. In December 2019, 5-year-old Harmony vanished from Manchester, New Hampshire. Her father, Adam Montgomery, never reported her missing. No one did, until 2 years later, when her biological mother, Crystal Sorry, raised the alarm. By then, Harmony was long gone. What investigators uncovered was chilling. During a car ride, Harmony had a toileting accident. Enraged, Adam punched her in the face again and again. His wife, Kayla Montgomery, testified that he hit her repetitively, even at red lights. He only stopped when Harmony stopped responding. Adam didn't call for help. Instead, he wrapped Harmony's body in a blanket, left her in the car, and later stuffed her into a duffel bag. Over 3 months, he moved her remains between a cooler, a shelter ceiling, a hotel fridge, and eventually a restaurant freezer. Kayla recalled Adam discussing using a saw, lime, and even a NutriBullet to destroy evidence. She had barely any skin, she said. Just bones. Very bruised. Adam's defense claimed panic, not intent. They argued he found Harmony dead and simply tried to cover it up. But the jury didn't buy it. In February 2024, Adam was convicted of second-degree murder, assault, abuse of a corpse, evidence tampering, and witness intimidation. At sentencing, Harmony's family spoke through tears. Her aunt called Adam the most vile human on the planet. Her little brother, now adopted, said he missed his best friend. Crystal Sorry called Adam a coward and vowed to keep looking for her daughter's remains still missing to this day. Judge Amy Messer imposed the maximum sentence, 56 years before eligibility for parole. She described Adam's actions as indifferent to human life in the extreme. His violent history, robberies, shootings, assaults only made the sentence more damning. The case shocked the nation and ignited scrutiny of state agencies. A 101-page Massachusetts report condemned officials for placing Harmony with a parent who had a documented history of violence. Public outcry led to urgent policy reforms aimed at better protecting vulnerable children. But even now, behind prison walls, Adam Montgomery refuses to say where Harmony is. His silence continues the abuse. His crimes didn't end with death, they echo with every unanswered question. Sometimes, the most dangerous kind of harm isn't loud or visible. It's the kind hidden in plain sight. The tragic loss of Harmony Montgomery reveals the cracks in our systems and the silence that allows abuse to grow. Harmony's case isn't just a tragedy, it's a warning etched in silence. Custody decisions must weigh a parent's full criminal and violent history, not just biological ties. Prolonged isolation of a child from school, doctors, or extended family should always raise red flags. When a caregiver refuses to provide updates or access to a child, authorities must investigate immediately. Silence can signal danger, not privacy. Harmony's voice was stolen, and ours must be loud enough to protect the next child. Number 8. Robert Bryans. He didn't scream. He didn't break. He just drove off a cliff with his twin daughters in the back seat. It was June 13, 2020, and Robert Bryans had made up his mind. At Sunset Cliffs in San Diego, California, Bryans, a father filled with rage, deliberately drove his pickup off the edge and into the Pacific Ocean. In the back seat were his 2-year-old twin daughters unconscious. The truck landed upside down in the surf, trapping all 3. One child was limp. The other screamed as their father tried to tread water, failing. Officer Jonathan Weiss arrived and, using a leash tied to a police vehicle, rappelled down the cliff. He pulled Bryans and both girls from the water. They were all going under, he said later. One child suffered a brain bleed and spinal injuries. The other, miraculously, was unharmed. But this was no accident. Hours earlier, Bryans texted his estranged wife, "The girls are going to heaven and I'm going to hell to wait for you." Then he posted on Facebook, "Tonight, I'm sending my babies to heaven." His motive was vengeance. In a bitter custody battle, Bryans weaponized his children to punish his wife. Prosecutors called it the epitome of evil. Judge Joan Weber, visibly shaken, told Bryans, "It's a miracle you're not here for 2 counts of murder." He eventually pled guilty to attempted murder, kidnapping, and child abuse. In September 2024, Bryans was sentenced to 31 years in California State Prison, with a 10-year no-contact order against his ex-wife and daughters. In court, Bryans simply said, "I love my babies and I'm sorry." His ex-wife, Jenna Bryans, told reporters, "I can finally move on for myself and for them." She credited Officer Weiss's heroism. "Without him and that dog leash, my daughters wouldn't be alive." The city honored Weiss with a National Carnegie Medal and a citywide commendation. But behind the recognition, the trauma lingers. At the time of the crime, Bryans was out on bond for another felony. Though he had a domestic violence record, there were no signs of mental illness or substance abuse. He now sits behind bars, far from the sea where he nearly ended 2 innocent lives. When love turns into control, tragedy isn't far behind. What happened at Sunset Cliffs is a brutal reminder that danger can wear a familiar face and that sometimes the greatest threat to a child comes from the very person meant to protect them. To stay vigilant, here are 5 hard-earned lessons we must not ignore. Threatening messages, especially about children or death, must be treated as emergencies, not emotional outbursts. In high-conflict custody cases, courts must prioritize safety over parental access when there's a history of abuse. A parent's silence or sudden desperation isn't always benign. Sometimes, it's a prelude to violence. When custody becomes a battlefield and children are used as weapons, no family is safe. The ocean nearly became their grave, not from nature, but from the man who called himself Dad. Let this be the reminder: when someone threatens to take everything, believe them and act before the edge is in view. Number 9. Travis Caleb Decker. He was a veteran, a father of 3. By June 2025, Travis Caleb Decker had become Washington's most wanted man, accused of murdering his daughters and vanishing without a trace. Decker, 32, picked up Peyton, 9, Evelyn, 8, and Olivia, 5, on May 30th during a court-approved visit. But when he failed to return them, their mother, Whitney Decker, contacted police. On June 2nd, officers found the girls' bodies near Rock Island Campground in Chelan County. Each had been zip-tied and suffocated with plastic bags. Nearby, Decker's abandoned truck bore his bloody palm print. Investigators quickly realized this was no impulsive act. Days earlier, Decker had Googled how to flee to Canada and remote jobs in Canada. Cell data placed him scouting the area in advance. He faces 3 counts of first-degree murder, 3 counts of first-degree kidnapping, and a federal charge of unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. Despite the evidence, Decker disappeared. A trained soldier with survival skills and a history of mental illness, he slipped into the wild. Authorities believe he may be headed toward Canada via the Pacific Crest Trail. His ex-wife described long-standing concerns: PTSD, borderline personality disorder, and paranoia. A court had ordered treatment and anger management, but Decker never complied. At the time of the murders, he was reportedly living out of his car. "This is every mother's nightmare," Whitney said at a candlelight vigil. "They were kind, bright, loving girls. The system failed them." The case sparked national outrage, especially after it was revealed no Amber Alert was issued. Officials cited technicalities, no vehicle direction or abduction witness, but the public demanded reform. Critics say those rules must evolve, especially in high-risk custody cases. The manhunt has involved over a dozen agencies, including the FBI and U.S. Marshals. A $20,000 reward remains, but Decker's trail has gone cold. A reported sighting in Idaho's Sawtooth Wilderness triggered a massive search. Still, no trace. The cost of the search has topped $6 million. Still, officials refuse to close the case. Until a body is found or an arrest is made, Decker is a fugitive. And his daughters, Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia, remain symbols of a system stretched too thin. The wilderness may offer cover, but it cannot bury the truth. Decker is gone, but his crime screams louder than silence. When mental illness, custody disputes, and poor oversight collide, the results can be catastrophic. Here are 3 clear warnings drawn from this tragedy. Mental health compliance must be enforced. Court-ordered treatment without follow-up is meaningless when children's safety is at stake. Custody threats must trigger real safeguards, especially with known instability or prior defiance. Amber Alert rules need urgent reform. When a parent disappears with children, delay isn't caution, it's risk. The forest may hide him, but it can't silence what he did. 3 little girls are gone, not because no one saw the danger, but because the system looked too late. When custody, mental illness, and legal loopholes intersect, the cost is measured in graves. Until Decker is found, the clock doesn't stop. And neither should the fight to protect the next child before it's too late. Number 10. Rodney Shippy. Dishes piled high. No running water. A missing girl. And behind the door of that Oklahoma home, 3 lives lost, one of them self-inflicted. On May 29, 2025, Broken Arrow police arrived at the home of Rodney Shippy to serve a search warrant tied to the disappearance of his 20-year-old daughter, Alyssa. What they found shocked even veteran officers. Rodney, dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. His 10-year-old son, Logan, fatally shot. The family dog, also killed. Hours later, Alyssa's decomposing body was discovered in a back room. She had not left the house in months. Rodney's descent had begun long before that day. In 2022, his wife Lisa died by suicide in the same home. Less than a year later, Lisa's mother was stabbed to death by her own husband, who then killed himself. The ripple effect of trauma shattered what little stability remained. After Lisa's death, relatives say Rodney changed. He withdrew, stopped attending church, and rarely responded to texts. Court records reveal mounting debt, over $130,000 in missed mortgage payments and an active foreclosure notice. Electricity was intermittent. The water had been shut off. Trash filled the rooms. Logan, who had autism and was nonverbal, hadn't been seen outside in nearly 6 months. School officials had raised concerns, but no intervention came. Alyssa had reportedly dropped out of college. Her cause of death remains undetermined, but investigators believe she died days before the others. Though no official mental health diagnosis has been released, Rodney was known to have refused court-mandated therapy and anger management sessions. He just started sinking, said his cousin Patty Williams, and no one was able to reach him in time. Authorities have not confirmed whether the murder-suicide was premeditated, but the sequence of events, the child, the dog, then himself, suggests calculated despair. Alyssa's body, hidden in a separate room, adds to the tragic complexity. Broken Arrow has faced multiple family murder-suicides in recent years. Oklahoma reported a record 122 domestic violence homicides in 2023, with advocates urging lawmakers to fund more robust crisis response teams and better tracking of at-risk households. The family's GoFundMe page for funeral costs reads, "Alyssa and Logan deserved so much more. The loss is raw. But for some, the regret runs deeper. We missed the signs," Williams said, "and now it's too late to help them." There will be no court proceedings, no cross-examinations, but in the silence that remains, the urgency to act grows louder. When grief is left to rot behind closed doors, pain multiplies and often, the innocent suffer most. From this tragedy, there are urgent lessons for families, communities, and authorities alike. Caregivers withdrawing from social contact and skipping court-ordered therapy aren't just grieving, they may be spiraling into danger. Children with disabilities require extra oversight. Silence from a nonverbal child isn't proof of safety. Severe financial collapse, home neglect, and isolation in a household should trigger coordinated intervention before tragedy sets in. If no one knocks, the silence inside a broken home can become deadly. Grief ignored is grief multiplied until tragedy speaks for those who no longer can. You've just witnessed the darkest chapters of fatherhood, where love becomes lethal. These aren't just fathers, they were the very danger their children should have been protected from. But this list isn't over. The most shocking mothers in U.S. history are next, every woman currently on death row. So don't miss what's coming. Subscribe Justice Reversed, hit the bell, and share this video because these stories are real. And some are still waiting to die.